KCAA Loma
is one step necessary in the process to cutting down on the CO2 emissions that make up for about 40% of the global carbon dioxide or CO2 footprint. Reduction is something many big industries look at to help heavy industry reduce those greenhouse gases with dedication and commitment. Companies may also report or compute their CO2 by often following international standards, and I'm paraphrasing the GHG protocols. These products may also bear a carbon footprint. So we also look at those emissions over the byproducts life cycle, which go into that report. You're listening to the Business and Sustainability Hour on KCAA Radio AM 1050. Our next guest is an assistant teaching professor at the John and Willie Leon Family Department of Energy and Mineral Engineering at Penn State University, the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, with an expertise in environmental policy. With us today is Dr. Eric Schenke of the Pennsylvania State University. Hi, Dr. Schenke. We're happy to have you with us.
Hi, Daryl. It's Eric, and it's Dr. Schenke is fine, or Eric.
Okay.
It's really nice to be here with you today. Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, for sure. So what is the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences at Penn State?
Well, the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences was at Penn State. Well, we call it Penn State or the Pennsylvania State University, but here I'll just call it Penn State.
Okay.
We were started as a college back in around 1890 or so to really provide a training place for all of the engineers who were going to extract all of the coal out of Pennsylvania. And we were probably one of the first areas to really deal with petroleum engineering as well, since, as you might know, some of the world's first oil wells were developed up in Oil City, up on the western side of Pennsylvania there. So, and after, of course, the shale natural gas boom, we had a lot of education in hydraulic fracturing and extraction of shale gas. So, our college really started as a energy extraction and energy engineering college of a land grant university, which was, Pennsylvania's land grant university, Penn State.
Nice.
And and my department, Energy and Mineral Engineering, is where a lot of that expertise ended up as a department as the college continued to grow in its areas of geography and climatology and meteorology. We've even had some of, the big people known in meteorology these days, like AccuWeather. The founders of AccuWeather came out of our college as well. So we've had a lot of influence and a lot of history within everything spanning from the beginnings of the energy boom and industrial energy boom in the U.S. to understanding how that has affected climate change.
Okay, so currently you're an assistant teaching professor at the college. What is your role there?
My role there is as the lead sort of faculty for or co-lead faculty for the Renewable Energy and Sustainability Systems Master's Program, and that's a Master's of Professional Studies, which is offered and centered in our college and our Department of Energy and Mineral Engineering, but is offered through Penn State's World Campus, which means that pretty much anybody can earn a degree from anywhere in the world. So we have a lot of people coming in from everywhere from Saudi Arabia to UAE to a lot of military of our military currently deployed who are looking to advance their education. So they're able to do that while they're actually deployed.
That's very nice. So having a master's is really nice when moving forward, especially if you're serious about your education, I guess.
Oh, certainly.
So environmental problems occur in the association of energy production. Things like unpolluted water, groundwaters coming into contact or leached, as they put it, that have an impact on environments, among other ways. But clean energy and making it a priority can happen. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the unfortunate, um, problems, or one of the unfortunate effects of our, of the actually rapid growth of our economy within the United States over the last 150 years has been, really the environmental degradation that's occurred with energy production. I mean, we saw this from the 60s through the 1980s, certainly with the acidification of rain, primarily coming from the sulfur dioxides and nitrous oxides, coming out of our coal stacks, that was used in smelting iron into our steel beams, and really was the main element of driving our industrial engine forward. Now it's really looking at higher intensity use of and energy production. Not just coal stacks. We've kind of been able to move away from that. We understood. We made regulations that address that in terms of Clean Air Act and things along those lines. But now we're really concerned with the production of electricity for higher intensity uses, such as like aluminum smelting and aluminum production, and other higher end energy intensive kind of production aspects that require a lot of energy intensity to extract the wealth out of those, right? And this goes to even manufacturing for our renewable industry, right? So, if we want to get renewables made, we want to make sure that those renewables are made from a clean source. And part of the problem, of course, has been even in hydraulic fracturing. It's been, what happens with the wastewater that gets, dumped essentially in above ground ponds and isn't really well protected enough or regulated enough due to trade secret, to even know to even be allowed to know as a public, what is in that wastewater. So we risk ourselves, we expose ourselves to a lot of risks, primarily because of a lack of transparency from what a lot of the outputs are from these processes. So I think that's part of it. But I think the move to clean energy really has to be one that isn't just clean in terms of when you're producing the energy, but is clean in the entire life cycle of the process. And that means really from the extraction of the materials to the production to the use of the technology to the sort of result of the technology, or what we call the either the dismantling or the scrapping or the recycling of the technology. So what we're trying to do is make sure that whole process is clean, not just the actual production of the energy itself phase of the process.
So would you say that there was any success in that process?
Oh, I'd say there's been tremendous success. I think, we're starting to see, lower and lower impacts in terms of photovoltaic production, certainly lower air impacts, lower water impacts. I mean, I think it's, the main issue is with continuing business as usual in terms of hydraulic fracturing, burning of coal, and extraction of and using hydraulic fracturing both in the extraction of natural gas and also, and trying to really get as much as you can out of an oil play, or what they call a play, which is essentially an oil field.
That's very nice. And looking at renewables is one of those areas of that process.
Right.
That
I mean, renewables. We got to remember that renewables, they can. I mean, a source can be renewable as long as the energy supply is there. So, renewables cover things like photovoltaics, which extract energy directly from sunlight hitting the surface and turning that photovoltaic energy into electron energy, or through a wind turbine, which turns essentially a giant turbine in a way that creates an electrical current that we can capture or through hydrological dams, which allows the water to fall over, a turbine. So a lot of capturing of renewables is either through photovoltaics or some way of turning a turbine. Which that's everything from wind energy to hydrological energy to nuclear power plants, right? Because they're just using superheated steam to essentially turn a turbine.
Right.
And we often refer to nuclear as not renewable, but at least under some paradigms as somewhat of a sustainable energy approach.
That's very nice. And there was something new that's going on now. That's fusion technology is another form of clean alternative to energy, but there must be a lot to happen with current technologies for this advancement, as you were just stating as well, where nuclear energy products pursuing fusion-powered technology companies pulled in over $3.4 billion in recent years. What are your thoughts on fusion technology with the recent discoveries at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory?
Well, I have to congratulate them for accomplishing pulling off something very difficult and something that they've been trying to do for 60 years, since they really first envisioned using pulsing, or not necessarily pulsing lasers, but direct lasers to, create the kind of high pressure, high heat, and simulate the high pressure, high heat environments that you find in nuclear reactions, either in a nuclear fusion bomb or those that are easily found in the center of any kind of sun. So, you need this high energy, high intensity. They needed, I think, 192 lasers to make this happen. So, as you can imagine, it's very promising. They were able to get out of the system about 1.5 times the energy that they put into it. But if they want to be able to scale this up to something that would be like a power plant, they've got to make those numbers up to about 30 to 100 times the amount of energy that they put into it to make it viable for say, like a power plant system. And as you can imagine, carrying around 192 lasers isn't very portable.
No.
So it's not something you're going to find in a car engine anytime soon.
Right.
But it is certainly promising. And again, like I said, it took 60 years to get to the proof of concept. I don't know how many more years it's going to take to scale it up. I don't know if it would, we haven't gotten to the second iteration yet, so we can't say that it follows something like Moore's law, where Gordon Moore stated that the processing power of CPUs would double every 18 months or so. So I don't know, if there's going to be some kind of law that emerges out of the fusion race, but I think it's very exciting, and I think it's exciting for my son's children's generation, but I think that for now it's not a solution to bear on the issues we have to address in decarbonization of the global economy. It's not going to happen quickly enough to help us address that.
Okay, so problems in the past also are oil spills and other accidents or allowable releases of other forms of waste. Is it a chance for you to focus on how we move forward replacing, as we need to get started with a new infrastructure overhaul or updating? What would you say about overhauling and updating these infrastructures that we'd like to move forward to a cleaner energy?
Oh, are you talking about like the grid or?
Yes.
So, primarily the energy infrastructure. I think we've got production generation down very well. Generation means any major point on the grid that's generating energy, right? It could be a power plant. It could be a solar PV farm. It could be a wind farm. But anything that's really adding energy to the grid that then is getting distributed out to the various loads on the grid, which are the users, right? The loads, your house is like an energy load, right? When we speak about it in terms of like a big circuit. And the big problem there right now is that the grid is not smart, and that it doesn't necessarily know where the energy came from. It doesn't know where the energy is going. It doesn't know how to route it. So imagine us, trying to use the internet before the days in fact, the internet couldn't have existed without this idea of packet switching, right? So we have a way to send our information through all of these wires to get it from the source from the sender to the receiver. And I think what we need to do, and this is also what DARPA-E has been working on, is figuring out ways to send our energy in packets so that we are able to label it and know, because again, the information is also just a component of the energy, and it doesn't take much energy at all, is that we know where that energy came from, how it was produced, and where it's going, so that we can know our energy is actually coming from a clean source. That is one way. That's one of the things to make the grid smarter. Another thing is to address regulatory issues that allow somebody to both draw down from the grid like we normally do at our meters, but also put back up to the grid. So if we're producing more more energy or electricity than we're consuming at a time, then instead of going into a battery, that's just going back up into the grid and then being redistributed wherever it needs to be used.
Very nice.
That's one thing that helps us address, something that's well known in California there, which is certainly the peaks and the valleys. And it's a way to help us avoid brownouts. And so knowing and allowing for that to happen, and allowing people to, generate either credits or money from re-uploading to the system allows them to balance their energy load at home. So we have that, we have energy production, and I think we also need to actually think about putting more batteries in homes than PV, because that would allow us to take advantage of energy when it's cheap, store it in the home on a local battery, and then discharge it, and as opposed to pulling from the grid, discharge it from the battery during the peak hours. So that would, I think, smooth out what we call the duck curve, which is a curve that looks kind of like a duck that addresses the daily peak energy loads versus production, and the times when we tend to see, heavy brownouts and things like that, because the system is getting overloaded. So there's a lot of things we need to do to make the smart grid happen, not just putting up more wires. And I think that that's one thing people don't quite understand. It's like, well, we have all of these wires. What's going to make it smarter, or what's going to make it more resilient, right? So it's really addressing all of that and getting the energy to go where it is needed, when it is needed, within the grid. Because sometimes, energy generation plants go down. So we need to recircuit or reroute energy to those areas that fill that deficit, so that the system doesn't get overloaded in one particular area, and we might see a rolling blackout or something like that.
Right.
So investing in smart grid technology, will allow for I think greater resilience, greater local flexibility, and honestly greater choice in the market of where your energy is coming from. And hey, don't we all want better choices in the market?
Well, it sounds great. I mean, I don't even know where to begin thinking. It's just, this is something, and no one's ever heard of the duck curve before, before today,
right?
Probably. It's not something that we normally talk about, but it sounds great.
Yeah, we can do it.
Yeah, for sure. So, with other environmental problems that occur, though, from emissions of air pollutants, where are we going with that?
Well, environmental problems, we can worry. I mean, that's why we have to look at these things at a project level, sort of at a project level analysis. I mean, I think overall, the environmental concerns are really to reduce emissions, because I think the greatest threat to any species right now is going to be global warming, right? And the problem is, we worry about maybe a few birds getting taken out by, for example, by large wind turbines. But the fact is that about 100 times to 1,000 times more birds die every year by hitting windows and by getting taken by American house cats. Those are far greater threat to bird populations than wind turbines. And I tell you, if we don't get our energy transitioned over to a much lower carbon intensive energy, portfolio, then we're going to see a lot more deaths due to extreme heat, droughts, flooding, all of those kind of things, destruction of habitat. So to me, the greatest threat, environmental threat right now, isn't necessarily pollution, unless you consider greenhouse gases a pollution, which is part of the whole regulatory problem, right? I mean, this has to do with, like, can CO2 be regulated under the clean energy or clean air, the clean air policies, or is it not something that is considered a pollutant because it's, emitted by natural processes as well, like us breathing, or cows, excuse my language, but cows farting, right, with methane.
Nice.
So, but the biggest challenge really is mitigating and trying to, get CO2 levels down as soon and as quickly as possible, primarily to prevent these kind of runaway feedback loops. I mean, that's the stuff that keeps me up at night. It's not necessarily, mercury emissions, though that was the horror of the 1970s and 60s and 70s. From power plants and our power transformers and things like that. But right now, it's ultimately, to me, the thing that keeps me up at night is the melting of the permafrost and the release of methane, from all the methane from under that, which is, methane. I don't know if people realize, which is CH4. It's got 4 carbons and 1 hydrogen, as opposed to CO2, which has got 1 carbon and 2 oxygens. Is that CH4 is about 1,000 times more effective as a greenhouse gas in terms of its thermal insulating capacity as CO2. Luckily, it doesn't exist in the atmosphere nearly as long, but it is a much more powerful greenhouse gas than CO2. So, if we start to see these systems run away and methane start to emerge that has been locked in the permafrost, we're going to see massive, runaway systems that could, that I'm, I'm scared to think about what the models would show in terms of that. So, So that's the kind of environmental, effects that we really need to protect against. In my, I mean, I don't even want to say opinion. I mean, because at this point, it's pretty much fact.
No, I agree with that for sure. So we're here with Dr. Eric Schenke on the Business and Sustainability Hour, and stay with us. We'll be right back.
The Business and Sustainability Hour is on the air.
KCAA Radio has openings for 1-hour talk shows. If you want to host a radio show, now is the time. Make KCAA your flagship station. Our rates are affordable and our services are second to none. We broadcast to a population of 5 million people. Plus, we stream and podcast on all major online audio and video systems. If you've been thinking about broadcasting a weekly radio program on real radio plus the internet, contact our CEO at 281-599-9800. 281-599-9800. You can Skype your show from your home to our Redlands, California studio, where our live producers and engineers are ready to work with you personally. A radio program on KCAA is the perfect work from home avocation in these stressful times. Just type kcaaradio.com into your browser to learn more about hosting a show on the best station in the nation, or call our CEO for details. 281-599-9800.
The Business and Sustainability Hour is on the air.
We're back with Dr. Schenke, Eric Schenke from Penn State and the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences. Thank you very much for waiting.
Sure.
So Eric, so sustainability. You're also currently researching and teaching sustainability-related issues.
Mm-hmm.
We'd like to have sustainability in countless aspects of our everyday life, and you look at why we need to comprehend better, what to do when things don't go to plan with that in mind. Why is it essential to start powering down where companies might need to have our help to evolve to be more capable of lessening and maintaining emissions reductions in the long run?
Well, I think it's important because one thing I always tend to say is that people can't make the right choice if the market doesn't make it available, right? And that goes up the supply chain, and from the consumer to the product to the energy that was used to make the product, and everything kind of back to the origination of those materials that the product is made out of. It could also be a service, right? I mean, we think about cloud computing, for example, and it seems like this very ethereal thing, but it's actually a very energy-intensive thing. I mean, if you look at, like, for example, Bitcoin, the blockchain technology and the computing technology that is required to drive Bitcoin actually has the same global energy budget as about the country of New Zealand.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's one currency that has an energy budget of a whole entire, country, and not a small country. So it's, when we think about these things, we really want to think about helping industry, take down the big chunks of, of our need to reduce CO2. And, for me, one of my areas of interest is reducing the CO2 intensity of our global supply chain shipping. Basically large-scale shipping companies, with the large container ships that I'm sure you see a lot of, in the ports there near LA, that really are coming from all over the world, and they're still, running on essentially a low grade of kerosene, and they're emitting the CO2, and then they're also emitting a tremendous amount of particulate matter, which is then getting in the oceans and causing the that black matter is actually creating a thermal, a surface for thermal absorption of the sun. So it actually accelerates the heating of the oceans, and certainly of any time it lands on ice. So yeah, I think reducing, the carbon intensity of that would be a really great first, major step. I mean, we've taken a lot of first steps. I think we need to take some second and third steps. For me, something like using liquefied hydrogen for ships, for container ships would be a really good step. We looked at trying to do this with batteries, and it's just not really possible in terms of the weight of the battery and the distance that these need to travel. So the solution that we've identified as one for plausible, that could be plausible, and it wouldn't require a complete retooling of these ships, would be, say, the use of green liquefied hydrogen. The biggest problem is trying to liquefy hydrogen because it requires really high pressures and to stay at a cold enough temperature where it can be liquefied. But if we can figure that out, it wouldn't take up any more space than the fuel currently does on these cargo ships. But yeah, and any places we can that are already electrified, like aluminum smelting, or any part of the supply chain that is already electrified, that electricity could be coming from renewable and far less GHG intensive sources. So that's really the goal for us in engaging in industry, and you see a lot of industry leaders moving in these directions and realizing that actually it's going to be cheaper in the long run to make these moves, and the electricity sources from, say, wind and solar right now are actually extremely market competitive at 2 to 3 cents per kilowatt hour, at more of a wholesale rate. So I think it's the biggest challenge is where we use liquid fuels, things like planes, aircraft, large container ships, and our shipping infrastructure, like our 18-wheelers and even down to our mail delivery trucks. So getting all of those that are currently liquefied, and based on a fossil source, converting that to something that can be driven on or driven by electrification or by another fuel source like a biofuel source, or ideally liquefied hydrogen would be far preferable, and take us many steps towards decarbonizing the global economy.
So these are renewable energies: the wind, the solar, the hydro, and biofuels.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
These are renewable energies, though: the wind, the solar, the hydro.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is a nice step in that. It is a step in that one direction.
Right,
like
and they talk about green
transition.
hydrogen being used. So green hydrogen is really created through an electrolysis process that breaks down water into two hydrogens and one oxygen. But you got to do that with electricity, and a lot of people have proposed, well, let's do that with our wind sources, for example. And we've also looked at actually taking superheated steam, which can be one of the waste products from our nuclear reactors, and using that superheated steam to much more readily create hydrogen. It's a complex process, but it can be achieved actually fairly simply without much without altering much the current infrastructure. So there's a lot of interesting small-scale examples of this coming out at this point, and coupling of these energy systems that already exist to try to create a synergy and trying to take like excess cycles that might not be adding to the grid at the time, or you can't turn off a nuclear power plant entirely. You know what I mean? So use those extra cycles to create something like hydrogen as a mode of really energy storage.
So we touched on a lot here with renewable fuels in transportation and hydroelectric steam and superheated steam. So it's a nice step, like I said before, in that direction, moving away from these low-grade and corrosive type fuels. These
Right.
kerosenes and other things that we use. So it brings up another question for me. What is energy education?
Well, energy education, it happens certainly at a number of levels. I think it's interesting. I have a third grader at home, and trying to teach him about energy and where it comes from, is one level. But it's good to start young, and it's good to focus on K through 12 in terms of where does the stuff that turns on your light in the house come from, and what's all that about. But energy education also has to do with stakeholders in terms of educating a local population about making wiser choices, smarter choices in terms of where they source their energy from, and how they use the energy once they have it. So we have two major areas. One that people can do, and one is energy efficiency. So what can we do to make the systems that we use and currently have more energy efficient? That means like our HVAC systems and our systems at home, like even our doors and our windows, and to make sure that the heat that stays in, or the cool air that stays in, isn't getting out, and that we're not spending a lot of energy unnecessarily heating that kind of air. So energy efficiency measures, moving from traditional light bulbs to LEDs has been one of them. But and again, we need to improve those products so that people don't really notice a difference. But energy efficiency can also mean getting a more efficient heat pump, moving from say natural gas heating to more of a heat pump that and it handles both heating and cooling. And that has a lot to do with electronics, and how slowly or quickly your heat pump spins up has a lot to do with it. So a lot of these things can be, consumer choices and even community level choices in terms of, one project we just finished looks at how HOAs in Virginia can leverage their HOA status to maybe think about, investing in community solar.
That's a great idea.
So thinking about these things as consumers, but then there's energy education for the industry itself. And this is one thing that we've been seeing in my program a lot over the last 5 to 7 years, is that we're seeing a tremendous amount of interest in people coming in from existing energy jobs in petroleum and natural gas, coming in and wanting to be retrained for the renewable energy field. And so, they might have worked for, a major utility, a major energy utility, and for 15 years, and now they see that, hey, they're actually seeing the writing on the wall from where they stand as producers and as the major utility, that they want to come in and get retrained because they see that the utility and everybody is moving, towards renewables, regardless of where the policy stands. The market is driving those choices. Right?
Well, that sure does help the workforce, though.
Yeah, well, the problem is that the workforce right now, and this is my main area of concern as an educator, but also as somebody who's been in this field for a while, is that are we going to have enough people educated up in the energy industry to meet our energy transition needs? And, it's going to be a close call. I'm not really sure we do have enough people. I know for a fact we don't have enough people coming up through the pipeline to keep our nuclear energy facilities running, and that's kind of a scary thing to think about. But, we talk about wanting to expand nuclear energy, but we just don't have enough people right now coming up who are trained in it as nuclear engineers to run the existing facility. So I don't, so that's why it's really important for me to emphasize this and really, get the interest out there that, hey, if you want a career, if you go to the Department of Labor and Statistics, if you look at the two most areas of job growth over the last 5 years, number one is solar installer, number two is wind installer. And they far outpace any other job growth column, which I think the third is maybe nursing and home private health care. So, the need is there, the demand is there, and we don't teach necessarily people who go in and physically install the systems. We teach people at a slightly higher level, the project managers and the project designers of these installs. So we're teaching the people, how to install a grid level utility solar system, or how to install, a large project. One of the projects we just finished, which was really fun, designing for, was a 45-hole golf course just south of Chicago that wanted to install about an acre-size photovoltaic system. And we demonstrated that the net present value in terms of our calculations was that after about 20 years, they would have essentially been able to save or pocket about $1.5 million and run their golf course on clean energy for 25 years. So, I think energy education comes, also at the high level of the consumer, like the golf course itself, the people designing those projects, which are my students, the energy engineers, which are designing the basic tools and the functions like better photovoltaics at a very, physics and engineering level. And then, essentially your everyday consumer who might switch from, a conventional or CFL bulb to an LED bulb. So, I think that to me, energy education is a really broad spectrum kind of thing. And, it's not just about turning off light switches. I was always a little baffled why we put so many stickers up in bathrooms at colleges, like, turn off the lights. I'm like, just get some motion detectors. Stop trying to retrain everybody. Like, just make it easier.
That is stuff that's happening now, though, with motion.
What's that?
That is stuff that's happening now with motion when you walk in.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know. It only
took
took 15
nice.
years to come to that idea.
But you have you said your students are actually were actually doing the install on that golf course. Some of this stuff, right?
Well, they're doing the design of the project, and then what we do is they're able to manage it for the course, and then get the proper installers, the people who are doing the on the ground work. So
very nice.
I mean, we do some of that as well at Penn State, but we're not doing that necessarily at the graduate and Masters of Professional Studies level. That's and that you don't even need a college degree for that, which is a great thing. You just need some vocational training, and you can get out there and have a really good job, in installing these things. It might not be, you might have to travel a bit, but, that's honestly been kind of the trait of most energy jobs throughout the history of energy. I mean, once you tap an oil well, you kind of, and if you still want a job, you kind of got to go to the next place to tap a new well. So it's been par for the course, no pun intended, for a while now with energy-related jobs. So, but and of course maintenance is a big thing. O&M and OEM and stuff like that, and just basically, we build those costs into the project design, right? The cost of maintenance and the cost of even disassembling the project after 25 years, and the money that can be made 25 years later from scrapping out the project. So why
is it a limit at 25 years, if you don't mind my asking?
Well, right now, I mean, so if we look at a typical typical photovoltaic installation, most of them are essentially rated for, and really only tested for about a 25-year, limit. I mean, somebody comes out with a new solar panel, they don't test it for 25 years before it gets on the market. They just project, and do intensive testing, much like we do with anything in terms of like a car or something like this. So,
right.
We rate it at 25 years. And that's usually for a photovoltaic panel. Say we start out at a level of, we counted at about 100% efficiency. It's not 100% efficiency in terms of converting solar to electricity. It's only about 28% efficient. But we talk about it as being at its peak or 100% level of efficiency. And then after 25 years, those photovoltaic panels are only about 90% efficient. So they degrade over time. But
I see.
They only degrade about 0.5% or 0.5% a year. So over about 25 years, they actually get down to about 90% efficient. But they're still producing 90% of the electricity that they did when they went in, when they were first installed in year zero. And if we look at the carbon, greenhouse gases that were taken, and if we take those into account, the greenhouse gases that were used to create the photovoltaic cells themselves and to install them and to extract them and everything, that gets paid off within about 5 to 7 years. So after about 5 to 7 years, you would say that it has about the same greenhouse gas intensity as maybe burning, natural gas. Well, from year 7 to year 25, that is carbon free. So all of that energy from year 7 or even year 5, because it's getting more and more efficient, and we're using better and better renewable sources to create those panels. By year 25, you've had 17 years or so of carbon-free energy production.
Nice.
And that's a great thing.
So we're here with Dr. Schenke on the Business and Sustainability Hour, and stay with us. We'll be right back.
The Business and Sustainability Hour is on the air.
KCAA Radio has openings for 1-hour talk shows. If you want to host a radio show, now is the time. Make KCAA your flagship station. Our rates are affordable and our services are second to none. We broadcast to a population of 5 million people. Plus, we stream and podcast on all major online audio and video systems. If you've been thinking about broadcasting a weekly radio program on real radio plus the internet, contact our CEO at 281-599-9800. 281-599-9800. You can Skype your show from your home to our Redlands, California studio, where our live producers and engineers are ready to work with you personally. A radio program on KCAA is the perfect work from home avocation in these stressful times. Just type KCAAradio.com into your browser to learn more about hosting a show on the best station in the nation, or call our CEO for details, 281-599-9800.
Hi, Daryl.
So it's a lot to calculate zero carbon energy systems, but with many ideas around the subject. So, and there may not be no one size fits all. Key with a few success stories like the waste, around waste energy and fuels and climate action. Would you like to elaborate on what the journey entails for a carbon zero?
Well, at a high level, we need monetary policies, we need regulatory policies that really drive, the adoption and the investment in these technologies. We need, just like we did for the fossil fuel industry for a very long time, and like we still do. I think most people don't realize that the fossil fuel industry receives far more subsidies from our government than on a yearly basis than the renewable industries do. So there's the large scale motivations that need to happen, but on the other hand, right now, regardless of those policies, it's just good market sense to say pay less money for your electricity, especially if that electricity is being generated by renewable resources and far less carbon intensive resources. I always say that, and then this is one thing I tell my students, I'm like, look, we could think, because I teach applied energy policy and I look at what governments do and how energy policies have impacts and all of these kind of things. But really, these things don't happen if we don't, do it one project at a time. And so, we teach them how to think about the big picture, but to really pull off this energy transition, we can only, really achieve it one project at a time, right? We're not going to suddenly turn everything on or turn everything off one night and everything on the next morning, and it's going to all be, carbon neutral. So
no, of course not.
It's one of those things that it's like, one car at a time. People replace, with better electrification. We're starting to see this with, mainstream pickups now, which is great. Ford F-150 electric or a Dodge Ram, electric. I mean, I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities out there. I worked with some students back at Penn State that were, working on, and this was before the Dodge and Ford came out with their, or Dodge hasn't yet, but they are coming out with their, electric muscle car. And so we had students who were really working towards the electrification of the muscle car, 10 years ago. So I think, again, one project at a time, one product at a time, and how do we do that? How do we calculate these things? How do we create the pro formas, which are the economics behind it, the spreadsheets and the projections and the levelized cost of energy over the life cycles, all of that kind of stuff. How do we get down into the nitty gritty to know that we're actually moving, to know that we're actually moving towards the goal? I mean, the biggest challenge with sustainability, with climate change, with carbon neutrality is understanding how, what indicators we want to really be paying attention to. I call them sustainability indicators, but the number one sustainability indicator is really emissions. And if we're not measuring emissions from any given product or process, then we're not really doing our due diligence to understand how we're trying to move towards a carbon neutral or even hopefully a carbon negative economy in that sense. Because the life world out there, the trees and the birds, that'll all balance out the rest of the carbon. So if we can reduce our carbon output as much as possible, nature's going to give us a hand. But if we don't, it's gonna hurt us. So really, trying to do this and trying to teach our students through, we basically, for our masters, we have they have to take 11 courses and some core courses and some specific courses either in sustainability management policy or in solar and renewable energy. And through those, we try to teach them how to work individually and in teams and how to calculate out really, the best plan for moving forward, how to optimize these designs. And then, as new products come out, the plans get better and better, and the proposals get better and better. We've done a lot of proposals for the U.S. military and for our deployed forces. And, I don't know how many of those are going to get applied, and I probably wouldn't be privy to it if they did, but I'm hoping they do, right? I mean, that's an area of significant concern for reducing our greenhouse gas footprint.
And I think, too, another way of training up, as we talked about it earlier, people that are probably not trained and don't require a degree in that.
Right,
that
exactly,
field. Yeah.
exactly. And so we're trying to, develop ways for thinking about, for example, how to reduce, our foreign deployments' reliance on diesel fuel generators just in their camps, because somebody's got to go around every couple hours and refill those diesel generators that are outside of those tents.
Right.
And, if they don't do it, they lose their cooling or their heating in some more extreme environments. So we're just trying to, slowly knock off, quickly, ideally, more quickly knock off, this low-hanging fruit. And to me, the low-hanging fruit are these small projects and things like that, and efficiency projects and, conversion to renewable energy projects. And, the big stuff is really, like the global supply chain and the energy intensive industries and things like that. But, the market is, and I don't always put faith in the market, but, at this point, I think the market is really leading the way and showing us that the renewables in the end, especially if you take a levelized cost of energy and the social cost of carbon into account and all of these things, renewables are in the end actually cheaper. They are actually a better market decision and a better market choice. We just don't have enough of them yet to satisfy demand, right? So that's the main thing. And we don't really have the best grid yet to move that around, to move those, electrons around to where they are needed most.
So what is an everyday use for a sustainability strategy?
Everyday use for a sustainability strategy? Boy, that's a good question. So I don't know.
I mean, it's very complex, I know, and you've researched complex systems, so I don't know.
Right. Well, to think about sustainability at a personal level, that to me is more where I get hung up on the question, because it's a very hard thing to think about, right? I mean, we're going to, as individuals, we're going to make the choices that keep our family safe, that keep us comfortable, that keep us cool or that keep us fed, right? So at a personal level, it's actually it can be very complex to think about making a sustainability choice, or a choice about sustainable, what we might call, more of a sustainable virtue choice, right? Where people are trying to make the best choice, even if it costs a little bit more money, right?
Where every day is a great day. KCAA, Loma Linda.